to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today we're going to re-examine some of our long-held beliefs in marketing. Let's get straight to today's episode. Throughout our youth, we are subtly encouraged to fit into our surroundings, staying on the expected path of taking our studies as far as we can before entering the job market. Today's guest didn't do that, dropping out in the middle of high school to go work in the retail sector. Because she was a go-getter, she was recruited in 1997 to join in a retail experiment by a telecom carrier. At that time, cell phones were exclusively a corporate thing. They were seeing whether there could be a consumer market for them. And that turned out to be a great money-making opportunity, as we all know. And that led to her owning her own physical store called Parlez Wireless that operated as an authorized dealer for that carrier. She sold the franchise 6 years later, and since then, she has been providing consulting support to other businesses in service and retail, as well as speakers, consultants, and authors. Now, after hearing the unconventional path she took, you can see why her philosophy on marketing isn't the same as the old tried and true principles we were all taught. She believes that using those old tired ways yields merely mediocre results. And she wants companies to do better than that. So she teamed up with famed consultant Alan Weiss in 2022 and wrote her second book, Masterful Marketing. Let's go talk with Lisa Larter. I am so glad to welcome Lisa Larter. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. So we're here to talk about a book. Can you tell me the name of the book?
Masterful Marketing.
That's right.
Masterful Marketing. I co-authored that book with Alan Weiss. It was one of the scariest days of my life when I sent him an email and said, would you consider writing a book with me?
All right. So let's start with, for those who don't know, who is Alan Weiss?
Alan Weiss is known as the rock star of consulting. He's written probably 60 plus books. He's known all over the world as a global leader to anyone who is in a consulting practice.
Right. And you were just telling me before we started recording that you had actually had some interaction with Alan prior to the book.
Yes. So I joined Alan's community probably 5 or 6 years ago when Colleen Francis, who is an Ottawa native, recommended him.
Mutual acquaintance of ours, yeah.
Yes. So I went to one of his events and I felt like I found my people. And so I started to work with Alan privately for a little bit. And the next thing I knew, Alan was asking me if our team could help him with some of his digital marketing. So our team has transformed his website, his brand, visually his brand, not his voice, of course. That's 100% him.
Yep.
And we support all of his digital marketing, his podcast, et cetera. And we've done that for, I think, almost 5 years now.
Yeah. So then as we bring it back to the moment you were talking about, you wanted to find a way to work together with him on a book. Can you tell us what, in your opinion, is the central thing that you wanted the book to say to readers?
Well, when I initially reached out to Alan, I asked him if he would write a book called Value-Based Marketing. Because one of the things that Alan is known for in the consulting space is value-based fees. He
Correct.
really transformed pricing through value-based. And I felt like value-based marketing was really the same thing. The more value you can create for others through your marketing, the more leads and benefits your business is going to see. But too many people do the opposite, right? They're trying to get versus give. And so I approached Alan and asked him if he would be interested in writing a book on that topic. And the publisher liked the idea of masterful marketing as the title of the book versus value-based marketing. But that was the premise, is how do you deliver value? We both believe value is reciprocal. And so how do you create value for others so that it returns back to you in terms of business growth.
Yeah. And that word reciprocal is the nugget there. Because when we think about it, anybody who provides services, they can be marketing services, but any services, if they're following Alan's method, will set it up so that the value that it's delivered to the client is very upfront and noticeable and like frames the entire offering. Now, go reciprocal. What does everybody buy according to? We all buy whether or not there's value in it for us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it makes perfect sense that that would be the kernel that you wanted to build out from to get people to understand, okay, you want this. Guess what? Your buyers also want it. So give it to them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You talk about, so there's that old acronym WIIFM. And so just kind of building on that, and for anybody who doesn't know, that's what's in it for me. The book makes it pretty clear that if you're going to be providing and marketing yourself to a buyer, you need to follow SWIFT, SWIIFT. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So SWIFT is a term that I coined many years ago, see what's in it for them. And I coined that term because if you think about your own tendencies, let's say you log into LinkedIn, the very first thing you do is you check your own notifications. You check to see who wants to connect with me, who sent me a message, where have I been mentioned? That is the see what's in it for me. Like that's the WIFM on the other side. And so as a marketer, if you can show up in places that make other people see you, but you do it in a value-based way, instead of thinking about what can I get from my marketing, which is what's in it for me, see what's in it for the other person, you can actually be more effective in your marketing. I'm not a big believer in all these gimmicks and tripwires and upsells and downsells and complicated funnels and games that people play to try to get business online. I actually believe that if you lead with value first and you see how you can create value for other people, then the business takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm. Good point. And the book goes into talking about how people have needs. And if you can just try and describe what it is that you do that will address that need. I found it interesting that it actually expanded the definition, because a need is something that we know we've got to take care of, right? But it's also made clear in the book that something that today is a want could be tomorrow's need. Just help me out there. What was being said at that point?
Well, people know what they want, but they don't necessarily know what they need. So somebody might want more inbound leads, but they don't know what they need to make that happen. Somebody might want, I don't know, they may want better sounding audio quality on their podcast, but they don't know what they need to make that happen. And so your job as a marketer and or a salesperson or a service provider is to help people uncover what the true needs are. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you know. And when somebody shares something with you that is possible for you that you didn't even know is a possibility, you have now transformed the want into a greater need that someone can't unknow.
Yeah. And once they get it once or twice, so let's say it's a subscription to your technology solution, or they do a first project with your marketing team, then they do switch over to knowing, and they do absolutely put it now in the category of, I need that. Like when it comes time for them to do their next budget cycle, they don't dare, touch that line item. Right. Mm-hmm. So you can absolutely transform how people see what it is that they need. And I think that's important, because I think too often in B2B, especially, we've been used in the past to being order takers, mm-hmm. right? Instead of helping to be innovators and to show people what's possible. Because if we do that for them, I guess that gets us more than halfway there.
Yeah, you have to have a bit of vision for your buyers. and you have to be able to, I guess, anticipate or understand what somebody's really asking for. I think the example um, in the book is, I don't need a drill, I need a hole. And
Right.
so I think that we have to think about what is it that somebody really needs versus what they're presenting as their need. Because
Hmm.
what they're presenting with isn't necessarily what the outcome is that they're looking for from that particular want or need. It's your responsibility to kind of unpack it so that you can articulate the value properly and help people to see what is possible.
Hmm.
I like your comment about innovation. I think you have to innovate, or you have to I think there's a balance. You have to be careful, because when you're, especially in the marketing space, when you know a lot, you can overwhelm someone very, very quickly by feature dumping. So I come from the wireless industry. I used to work for TELUS. And when you are selling someone an iPhone, you do not want to talk to them about the 5,000 apps and all of the settings on the phone. You want to understand, what do you need your phone for? We
Right.
used to have a rule in my store, which was, you can't talk about something that the client you haven't uncovered as a need. Most people are coming in because they want to access email, text messaging, voice. They need voicemail, and they want to know that they can track their phone, that it's got GPS functionality on it. They don't care about some of the other things. And
Right.
so you have to be careful that you don't talk about things that aren't important to people too.
Yeah. So much there. That old, hitting pain points or feature dumping. Yeah, it's done in a vacuum, right? And when we're talking about innovating, I think what people really place value on, there's that word again, is us seeing a future state that is possible for them.
Yes.
And it can be in the short term or in the long term. But we've got to carefully pull out of them what it is that they want to see. So if,
Yeah.
we use some of Alan's past experience here, he pulled out of people that they wanted to see a different kind of consulting model. Everybody was doing hourly rates. Somebody came along and asked customers, well, would you like to see the outputs of the project and what that's worth to you be the basis for what you pay, not the input? And only
Exactly.
then did people go, yeah, I totally want that. Nobody's ever asked me, and I never thought of that, but sure, give me that.
Right. When you can correlate value to outcome, you can charge accordingly. I think the other thing in terms of the wants and needs that is important is we talk about the value distance and the power of asking one simple question, which is why. When you use the question why, you can actually increase the value of what someone needs significantly, because now you understand why it matters to them. And when you understand why something matters to them, you're tapping into emotion versus logic. And we talk about that in the book too. Logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. The more you can tap into the emotion of why something matters to someone, the easier it is for you to be able to provide that service to them. And so if you reverse that and you think about it from a marketing perspective, every single day you have conversations with buyers where you have an opportunity to ask questions to understand why the service you're providing matters to them. You have the opportunity to really uncover patterns within your existing group of buyers. When you uncover those patterns, you can tailor your marketing to creating value for those people. But if you never ask why, if you're not curious about understanding the why, you'll never get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, what do you need this for? What is it you're really trying to do? I think
No,
people,
but it's the opposite. It's not the what question, it's the why question. Why why do you need it to do that? Why do you want this? Why is it important? Why does it matter? What gets you into tactics? Why gets you into a more expansive state with your buyer where you can understand why it truly matters to them?
yeah.
Because beneath the surface, it's emotion drives our decisions. So I've done a lot of work in the retail industry, working with shopping centers, helping shopping centers with their marketing. And I remember one day I was at an event and somebody asked me, why people work with me. And I said, well, these big shopping centers, they want more traffic to cross the lease line because they want more people to go into their stores because they want their retailers to have more sales, yada, yada, yada. And this woman looked at me and she goes, I just kind of thought it was about ego. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. So
Mm.
I went to my buyer and I asked one of them, I'm like, why does this matter to you? And I uncovered that it actually was ego. It
Mm.
mattered more to them how they were perceived for the results that they were getting than the results actually mattered.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you
And yeah.
understand that, you understand that the more you do to make somebody look good, the more entrenched they are in continuing to do business with you because you just made them look and feel good. And there's a lot of people today that are seeking validation. Now, I'm not saying that that you're just going to validate people and make them feel good and send
And
them
walk away. No.
niceties. No, you need to provide results and value. But when you understand the correlation between the intrinsic value driver, you can approach things a lot differently.
Yeah. So the book also mentions the value chain. And wow, what an example you gave right there. I mean, the opening that person gave you to talk to a buyer, the buyer clearly had things like tenants on their mind and, how am I showing them value? So that was your overture to see the value chain even bigger than
Mhm.
the simple, okay, Lisa's group is hired by the shopping mall. It goes way beyond that.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at that in terms of how any person in any industry can go, the book also, I find, very helpfully differentiates between the DIY crowd, the done for you crowd, and the done with you crowd, or
Mhm.
yeah, done with me. So just help us understand how those are, because I think that has a lot of bearing on what it is they're buying. And if we miss that distinction and think, oh, well, you just want me to cook the meal for you versus you want me to give you all the ingredients and you make it, there's totally different reasons each of those buyers are doing it.
Absolutely. And I think that, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times it comes down to investment. The DIYers are typically looking to find a solution that is not as high priced so they can
Yep.
do it themselves. So,
Yep.
I would say a lot of businesses that are in startup mode, solopreneurs that are generating under $100,000 in their business, they're bootstrapping. And so they want a DIY model. They want to be able to follow the frameworks and do it themselves. Then you get people who are a little bit more mature in their business and they're not quite ready to hire a firm to take over and do everything for them, but they want someone to do it with them. They want that side by side experience of show me how to do this, help me do this. How information is not transformation. Transformation occurs when behavior changes. And so I'm going to use podcasting as an example. I wanted to start a podcast for, oh my goodness, I think 5, 6, 7 years. It took me 7 years to start my podcast. I had all the information,
Sure.
but I hadn't actually done it. And so I needed the skill practice in order to be comfortable doing it. So I needed the transformation and changing my behavior. And so the reason that people want to do things with you is because you get in the mud with them, you get in the weeds with
Right.
them, and you help them figure out how to do things. But then people get to a certain stage in their business where they're too busy. They don't have time to do it. So they want to hire someone to do it for them. And this is great. I mean, keeps a lot of people on my team employed. We do it for people. We do a
Sure.
lot of marketing implementation for them, but you cannot abdicate responsibility for your marketing. You still have to be involved and be a partner in that marketing and a steward of your own brand. Your voice and your contribution matters. Somebody else can take the content and tear it apart and create marketing and, spin it out there into the world. But you have to be the thought leader that created the original thought that gets used in other places.
Yeah, very well put. And I'll just bring us back to what we were talking about when we were asking why. For at least the done with me crowd, you're gonna need to know that anyway. This is only gonna make the work that you do when you get in the weeds with that buyer better, because you have an understanding of their end goal. And I have to think in anything service related that it's not going to be a one and done. There are going to be successive phases because their why is probably a long-term goal that's going to take several phases to get to.
Yeah. And I think, as entrepreneurs tend to be creative. They're great at starting, they're not great at finishing. And a lot of times people get stuck over the silliest things. I had a conversation with a client of mine yesterday, and he said to me, I need to talk to you about my newsletter because our team just designed a newsletter. He's like, there's 3 boxes at the bottom. And I know this sounds really stupid, but I just don't know what to put in those 3 boxes. That's a classic example of something that seems very, obvious to a marketer, but somebody who cares a lot about their brand, they need reassurance, they need support, they need help, they need somebody to do it with them in order to finish. I get a lot of people that come to me and say, I want to spend a half day with you. I want to spend a half day on building out my podcast or building out a marketing plan or building out my content plan. They just want someone to do it with them so that they have the accountability and the guidance to get it done. Because when you get things done, you actually build confidence and competence. You build the skill, and then you actually start to believe, hey, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. All the planning in the world. I guess I'm brought back to that old quote by Dwight Eisenhower, like the plan that you do, sure, that's big. In fact, you could say it's everything, but the plan is actually nothing. You got to do it.
Yeah.
We're going to come into talking about the content, which a big chunk of the book goes into, but we're going to take a quick break before we do that. I'm breaking away for a moment. You can keep up to date via social media. Take your pick of Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all of them. If you want to be notified of new episodes, visit funnelreboot.com. It'll give you a form for being emailed when each new show is out. Our website also has links to many of the podcast apps we're found on. And once you pull up the show on your app, I'd love you to subscribe to it. Lastly, if you know someone else who'd get value out of this content, please share the show's URL with them so they can do the same. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, Lisa, so we're back and continuing on Masterful Marketing, we're going to get into the content that we need to do as we've thought through, what our value is, and we figure out how to provide value to clients. There was this really important thing that my eye caught, and it was near the end of the book, but it was about how, just like you said a moment ago, where the buyer is going through different phases, we have to first tailor what we're doing for the phases we're at. And there's this accelerant curve that's described and how we need to figure out kind of what to do in one watertight compartment before we hop over to the next watertight compartment of that curve and nail those. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah. I mean, Alan calls it an accelerant curve. I call it a service progression. One of the things that I talk about a lot in my work with my clients is I use the metaphor rock pebbles and sand, and I use
Perfect.
The science experiment.
Yeah.
If you put sand and then pebbles into a jar, your big rocks don't fit. So if you start with your big rocks and then you put pebbles in and then you put sand in and you shake it, you actually have a little bit of room to top it up with beer. So I look at the accelerant curve as being a very similar model to the rocks, pebbles, and sand.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be able to differentiate what is a big rock in your business, what is a pebble, and what is sand. And you've got to get, my belief is you've got to get really good at your big rocks before you get into the pebbles and sand.
Yeah.
A lot of people are uncomfortable with selling. And because of that discomfort with selling, they gravitate towards the sand. They stay on one side of the accelerant curve.
Yeah.
They stay to the far left where things are really low priced, and then they struggle in their business for years because they're not comfortable asking for a higher valued product or service. And so if you want to grow your business fast, you need to get comfortable with offering a big rock service, things that are on the far right side of the accelerant curve. That's how you stack business. When I started my business years ago, I remember thinking to myself, how can I generate regular monthly recurring revenue from clients? How can I, again, back to the wireless industry. The wireless industry is very, very big on retaining clients, reducing churn, retention of clients. So I thought, how can I take what I know from this very successful industry and apply it to my business? Well, it's easy. I can create programs that people can either pay upfront in advance for a year, or they can go on a monthly retainer program.
Yep.
And I can stack my business by adding these monthly retainers and scale in a really fast way. And so the monthly retainer was really taking the big rock and chunking it down into bites that were easy for a consumer to say yes to.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of me saying, how can I sell $30,000 to a customer? I asked myself, how can I get someone, or how can I offer a service that is $2,500 a month where someone will stay for 3 to 5 years?
Right.
When you do that, now that $30,000 is really a $150,000 client. And so if you're always looking at the left side of the accelerant curve, how can I sell a $7 ebook or a $97 program? If you spend all your time and energy on that side, then it's going to be hard to grow your business. The other piece that correlates with that is when you are first starting out, which is when you are usually the most averse to selling higher priced products and services, you have the smallest amount of reach. In order for you to scale things on the left side of the accelerant curve or things that are sand, you need a lot of reach.
For sure.
So Alan didn't launch his $1 million consulting for the world online program when he had 100 people on his mailing list. He was selling $16,000, $20,000 workshops for the same program. He didn't develop the online program until he had massive amounts of people on his mailing list where the volume could make that particular watertight segment really, really solid.
Yeah.
And so people get it reversed, right? They when they start out and they have little reach, they offer little programs and they wonder why they're not growing. You have to actually start when you have little reach. The bigger priced products and services are what you really need to learn how to market and offer to people.
Yeah, so well said. The name of the game there is that you've got to figure out how, with the numbers that you know, your circle, before it's widening, can glom onto you. And let's not forget that some of those initial ones can be important referrals for you. When you start to get into those lower areas, you're also going to encounter churn, right? So the wireless industry, coming back to, there's something, at those lower price points where people say, yeah, I've used this for a while, but I'm going to switch over to something else. Or as we said a moment ago, I'm now at the point where I want a done for you model. So I'm just going to go whole hog. Yeah. So let's keep in mind that you have to figure out how to work with the kinds of customers that are those big rocks and do everything it takes to satisfy them. And then when you want to progress on to things like lower cost offerings that are at scale, okay, now you'll have enough information and your value will be tweaked so that you can explain to yourself when people churn. It's not going to be gut wrenching, or maybe it's even a calculated amount and you want to stay within that rate. So, figure out what you need to do that's appropriate for your phase. Don't try to do it all at once.
Right. And don't let other people tell you can't do something. When I first started my consulting business in this space, I met with a businesswoman in Ottawa and I showed her this one-page offering that I had put together for my services. It was a half day and a full day. And this is back in 2008.
Okay.
And I was charging at the time $750 for a half day and $1,500 for a full day.
Yeah.
And when I showed this to this colleague of mine and said, "What do you think?" Do you know what she said to me? She said, "I think you should be charging half that if you want to get any business in this market." That afternoon, I had a meeting with a potential client who was interested in my services. And I decided that I was not going to let that person's feedback shake my confidence in the
Yes.
value that I thought I could provide, which is really important. You have to stand firm in your value. And I put together, I said, "This is how we can start." And they said to me, "Well, I want to start with a full day, but I just have one question. Once we're done with that, can I buy more?" That client turned into a multi six-figure client of mine and ended up referring me over the years, probably in excess of $1 million in business.
Yeah.
So when you're starting out, don't let someone else set the level of your confidence in your fees. Set it yourself.
And I shudder to think, but if you had made a last minute reduction in what you were charging, that person may have looked at it and said, they're too small for me. They are probably just too new at this. They don't know enough of what I need. And right. And it could have gone a lot differently.
Absolutely. Or they could have hired me and I would have lost 50% of the revenue
Right.
that I potentially could have earned probably in the first 3 years of my business.
Right.
So but I didn't go in there offering them a $97 program. I went in there offering them a half day and a full day. And at one point, this client said to me, she said, it was actually Greta Blosky from Billingsbridge Shopping Center. And she said to me, "You're so good at this. I wish you could just do it for me." That, my friends, is a clue.
Yep.
And I
Ding,
said,
ding, ding.
"Well, I can." So I put together 3 options. And this was before I knew Alan and all of Alan's option work. I know options because I'm a retailer. You never take a woman one pair of pants to the dressing room. You bring them options, right?
Correct.
And so I went back and I gave her a $1,500, a $2,500, and a $5,000 a month option. And I came back from that meeting and my husband said, "How'd it go?" I said, "Great, she's on board." And he said, "What'd she pick? The $1,500 one?" I'm like, "No, the $5,000 one."
Amazing.
But, when I put that together, Glenn, I didn't think anybody would pay me back then $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So sometimes, when you're creating your accelerant curve, you get to choose how far right you go.
True.
You get to push the envelope. And, one of the things that Alan has taught me is when you're creating options, if the third option is the most expensive option, start making the third option option 1, and then make option 2 and 3 even bigger. There's always a bigger buyer. There's always somebody out there that wants the VIP option. You go to a restaurant, there's always somebody that chooses their meal based on price, not based on food. They scan the price list. Some people are going to choose the cheapest, but there's a lot of people that look for the most expensive.
Yeah. And I mean, the psychology of it is they're looking at something, let them, as you say, with the number 3 option, build it bigger, add on more to it, and let them be the one to say, I don't quite want everything in that package. Can we just take one thing out? But don't think like, as you say, the a la carte, menu where they're all little tiny items, because that's not going to paint a vision that they're going to look at and go, okay, this is getting me what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get in a moment to the social media and the content and how you speak in a way that simply oozes these principles. But there's an important part of the book where, and you mentioned it when you were talking about Alan's list, and I know both him and you are big practitioners of having communities. There's a term in the book called invitation marketing, and I'm just going to read out what it's described as, because man, there's just so many good things that come out of it. But it's taking those people that you've had previous conversations with and bringing them together as a community. Just one of the reasons that that's good is it says you can ask them if they're interested in something before you go through the work of setting up sales pages and marketing materials. So for anybody who, even after you describing so well how you need to position these offerings, even if they're still not convinced, I guess your answer is you tell them to go to their community and ask them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the thing about community is you have people that know, love, and trust you that you know of, and you have people that know, like, and trust you that you don't even know that they're watching you. You don't even know they're following you. And what I love about invitation marketing is I can put something on Facebook and I can say, I'm thinking about doing ABC. I envision it to be like this, and this. And I'm looking for 5 people who would like to do this with me. If you're one of those 5 people, if you want to know more, just send me a private message. I don't put the price or anything. I just put the idea out there. And people reach out. I'm interested. And most of the time, they actually comment and they're supporting my marketing by commenting on it. And I run this one program called the Beach House Mastermind. And I went to an event that Alan hosted in Castle Hill, and I fell in love with Castle Hill. It was beautiful. And on the way home, I was a passenger in the car. I went on to VRBO and I found a mansion on the beach in Florida, and I downloaded pictures from this mansion, took screenshots. I uploaded 6 pictures to Facebook, and I said, I'm thinking about hosting a beach house mastermind retreat next year for 10 women who want to do A, B, C, D, E. If you're interested, send me a private message and I'll tell you the details. Within 24 hours, I had sold all 10 places.
You're telling me you didn't spend a year making a very detailed plan? You didn't, navel gaze over this for eons?
I didn't. I just put the idea out there, and I still don't have a sales page, but I have a wait list. And every year since, that beach house has sold out. And when I go to the beach every year, I take a flip chart and I put it on the wall and I put room, whatever. I list the rooms and I put the price beside each room because you got to pay more if you want the one with the balcony on the water, right?
Yeah.
And I just say to people, if you want to come back next year, just sign up for the room you want. And I inevitably 80 to 90% of the people that are there, they've taken all the spaces for next year before I even have to ask. And I have a wait list. So now it's to a point where I can invite my own people. I can reach out and say, hey, I have a spot open at the beach. Are you interested in coming next year? This is what it looks like. And I don't even have to market it online because I've created such demand for the experience. But that all comes from invitation marketing. I want to talk about the downside of invitation marketing, because the downside is your fragile ego can get bruised. Because you can put an idea out there and hear crickets.
Yeah.
And I have had that happen. I have put ideas out there where no one has responded. And instead of getting deflated and trying to put it out again and force it on people, I just go to Facebook and delete it. That one wasn't for people. I'm so glad I know, because I don't have to invest a penny in trying to make this happen.
But as an experiment, it told you what they don't want.
Exactly. And that's valuable.
Absolutely. So we've, given people a lot of, those are great results. And, if I'm tabulating this right, your inputs were sitting in a car and getting some photos off of a website and a flip chart and probably a few emails. So, I think folks are pretty much convinced that you get a priceless outcome for those few little low-cost inputs. but we have to use social media to get there. And so, now bring us in on what are some of the block and tackle things that we must have been doing up until the point that we put out the invitation that's going to cause people to, respond. We do actually have to put out content first.
Yes. And I think the answer to this is so boring and so simple and so easy. You just have to show up
Right.
daily and add value. There are three things that I tell people to do on a daily basis. One, publish something that is valuable for your audience, for the people that do business. I sometimes I just sit and I think, okay, what's something I could share today that would be helpful for someone who is my customer? And I will visualize a customer of mine and say, what could I share today that would be valuable for this person? And that helps me to do that. The second thing that you should do every day is you should engage with content that your customers, your colleagues, your community have shared. Show up in their notifications because you commented or liked something. Do it in a sincere manner, add value if you can, but show up on their radar. And then the third thing is comment and or engage in other people's content where you want to be seen by new markets. So if I knew, for example, that all of my buyers read HBR, I'd be commenting on HBR posts every single day.
Yep.
Because I know that would give me increased visibility to people that follow HBR, but don't necessarily know who I am.
Okay.
And so if you just do those three things every day and you put it out there, you don't have to spend 5 hours scrolling with your thumb. Just get really smart about it and invest in relationships with people. And that will position you so that when you do eventually make an ask and say, is anybody interested in coming to this beach house? People are happy to do so.
Yeah, and you want to keep them in ratio, right? So I bet that the asks are in the small minority. They're the most important to you, but they're way down the list in terms of what your prospects are looking at. So as long as you keep that ratio, you're good. And you also point out that you have to have a somewhat strong point of view. If you're just publishing something that they're going to read in anybody else's feed, that's not going to cut it.
Right. You have to have opinions. Thought leaders have thoughts. And so if you're just regurgitating the 100 most popular quotes on the internet that are the same 100 quotes that everybody else has captured and thrown into buffer, you're not going to make a difference. You have to have opinions and thoughts and ideas that are unique and your own. And one of the ways that I get a lot of my ideas is actually through reading. I feel like when you read books, you gain insights, and those insights are valuable to people. I run a book club called Thought Readers, and there are people in my book club that pay $1,200 a year to be part of the book club that say to me, I don't even read the books. All I want to read are the emails you send out with the insights that you have gained from reading what you read. Well, insights are informative to other people, and insights are your own. So when you can synthesize information and come up with your own insights and opinions and then share that, you're creating value for other people.
Yeah, this is gold. And you and I, way back in the annals of time, we both went to a conference called Podcasters Across Borders. And this is the same thing they talked about, where they were saying, just fuse together whatever it is that makes you with whatever material you happen to absorb. And all you've done when you've set those two things together is allowed people to understand how you see the world. And if they identify with how you see the world, they'll say exactly what your book readers do. I don't care about the book. Yeah, I'm sure that author's smart. You I want to hear from because it was the lens you provided on what they said that makes me really feel like I can do this.
Exactly. The other thing that I will say is when you get strong in your opinions, people will take pot shots at you. And you have to not be so sensitive that when people don't agree with you, that you feel like you should stop posting content. You have to be a little bit curious. You have to lean into and inquire as to where people are coming from. I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I posted something, it's on my Facebook page. I posted something on LinkedIn first, and then it was reshared by my team on Facebook. I was getting annoyed with all this quiet quitting stuff that I was seeing on LinkedIn. I think because I'm a small business owner that, quite literally has busted my ass for the last 3 years to keep my team employed.
Right.
And I posted something about if you're not happy with where you work or you're in a toxic work environment, here are some things you can do. And I basically gave a list of things that, allowed you to frame and have a conversation with your employer if you weren't happy. Well, somebody got a hold of that post and basically said that, I am a white, rich woman with privilege. And I had a bunch of comments I had some comments that were mean-spirited. I had some other comments, though, that I could have taken as being mean-spirited, but instead I actually leaned in and inquired more and learned from them. Because some people were saying, if you've ever worked in a toxic work environment and had a boss that you couldn't have a conversation with, this is great advice, but this is great advice, but this is great advice, but, and a lot of those buts for people that don't have the same life experience that I have were valid. And so my initial reaction when I first saw the comments on the post is, oh, great, here we go. Like I'm being canceled. But instead of letting that be the narrative, I chose to lean in and I chose to say, tell me more. What do you mean by that? I can see what you mean by that. That's a really great point. Thank you for adding that. This adds value to what I've said. And so I think you have to have a certain level of confidence and maturity and discretion. If you're going to put things out there that are different, sometimes people are not going to agree with you. And you have to be able to have conversations with people that have different opinions than you do. But you also have to have the discretion, if somebody is just being, pardon my language, an asshole, to delete and block the person, right? Yeah. But you can't, you shouldn't shut down voices and opinions that are different from you. You should lean into them and learn from them.
You can't have one without the other. The book makes the distinction between just dipping your toes in and making waves. So if you're going to make waves, yes, in a small percent of the time, you're going to get those pot shots. But making waves is the only way that you can get the kind of engagement that you got. And I'm reminded of that phrase, people may forget what you tell them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. When those people were engaged, I am sure that they felt like whatever they were talking about with you, that mattered to both of you. And that feeling is literally, what's fired gets wired. That literally is something that's going to be deep in their psyche, and that later on when they may have need for the services that you have, who are they going to remember?
Yeah, they may or they may not. But the other part of that is there are people who are watching. Your customers are watching. It's an open
conversation.
That's right. Your customers are watching. I had somebody reach out to me and say, I got to give you credit for how you handled that. You did a really nice job of, having this dialogue in public. And I think it's because I didn't try to defend my position. And instead, I tried to inquire to understand.
Yes.
But as soon as you start to defend your position, you're now in an argument with people. And it's not a comfortable spot to be in when somebody challenges you online. And you can very quickly feel like you did something wrong, feel like you should take down the post, feel like you should stop sharing your opinions and stop being bold about things, but you just can't do that. You have to be okay with these things happening.
You're going to get that. And you're also, to get back to what you said about crickets, you're also going to get those. But I can't stress for the listener enough how important Lisa's point was. There are others listening. And if you get the chance to, for example, have an event like Lisa did, and you invite people in, it's at moments like that where you can ask a simple question like, well, where did you hear about this? Or can you remember back to the first time that I ever showed up on your radar? And in the case of the Allens and the Lisas of the world, they, I guarantee, will say, I read your book, or I heard about your book, or I heard about you on a podcast, or I saw you on LinkedIn. So when we do those things, that's, you're going to have to wait for that gratification, but that's where you're going to hear it, is people are going to say, I was listening, and they'll mention something from a long time ago. And that is important because that means that what you do today may not come to fruition for a fair ways from now. So you have to be willing, right? As Lisa said, those 3 things every day. Can't stress that enough. Lisa, and I can't thank you enough. If people want to come to find out more about your podcast, the book, and other things that you do, where can they go?
The best place to go is my website, lisalarter.com. You can find my podcast there. You can find the book there. You can find my social media handles there. Everything. That's my house, lisalarter.com.
Awesome. And we'll send them there. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. I feel like we could have talked all day.
You bet. And it was a really enjoyable read. So thank you. And my hope is that it gave them better insight into their funnel so that they can make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.